السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
الحمد لله ثم الحمد لله. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونستنصره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له إلها واحدا أحدا صمدا لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. وأشهد أن نبينا وعظيمنا محمدا عبد الله ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وحبيبه. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين، وبعد. يقول جل جلاله في محكم التنزيل: وعد الله الذين آمنوا منكم وعملوا الصالحات ليستخلفنهم في الأرض كما استخلف الذين من قبلهم وليمكنن لهم دينهم الذي ارتضى لهم وليبدلنهم من بعد خوفهم أمنا يعبدونني لا يشركون بي شيئا ومن كفر بعد ذلك فأولئك هم الفاسقون. This is the final installment of the series of khutbahs that I began a number of weeks ago prior to Ramadan, as the next 2 weeks will be kind of focused on preparing ourselves for the holy month and that which it carries, as it will start inshallah ta'ala within almost 2 weeks. And the point of the series of khutbahs is because what I notice a lot amongst people is that their understanding or their comprehension of their own faith has lost its essence, has lost its spirit. There is a general understanding of certain do's and certain don'ts and certain cultural luggage or baggage that we carry with us and just general ways of behavior. But it's missing the thread that sews it all together, that unites this idea in its substance. And that piece happens a lot when we don't do revisions of things. Faiths throughout history have always had this problem, by the way. And not just faiths, but any ideology really. Over time, if there are no checks and balances within its own system, then you lose sense of what it was designed to do to begin with. The bigger picture is lost, and the focus becomes on a lot of details that, as for the lack of a better phrase, لا تسمن ولا تغني من جوع. Just phrases that don't really do much, details that don't really fulfill the basic goal or objective of this ideology. And Islam is no different in that sense. And the reason that throughout history, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send His prophets with tawheed, with this guidance, with the same teachings that we have, basically speaking, the same teachings. And then throughout time, the hand of man would find a way to corrupt it. And tawheed would be lost. And the teachings of that prophet would be lost, and the word and the book that he sent gets corrupt, and it all turns into something that has nothing to do with its essence. And this is how every faith has struggled. I mean, every faith on earth, in its essence, if you go back to its origin, historical origin, it was a prophet sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with tawheed. Every faith. We're not just talking about Christianity and Judaism. Any other faith on the planet. Hinduism to Buddhism to the faiths in the North Americans and South Americans, all of these religions, in their origin, our belief as Muslims is that they started with a prophet who brought tawheed. And then throughout time it got lost. So how do we prevent that from happening to us? How do we prevent the loss of the essence of the message throughout our lives? It's not enough just that the Quran is on that shelf over there, worded as it was when the Prophet ﷺ recited it to his companions. That's not enough. Because we know that at some point in the future, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that there will be, in Allah يقبض العلم انتزاعا من الناس لا يقبض العلم انتزاعا من الناس ولكن بقبض العلماء. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't take knowledge from people by just reaching into their chests and taking the knowledge out, but rather by the loss of scholars and loss of those who have the knowledge, meaning the knowledge will be there. The knowledge will be available for those who care to read it and learn it, but just no one cares to do that anymore. And the chains of narration, the chains of knowledge get lost over time. So how do we prevent that from happening? We have to have checks and balances within our deen. There has to be moments where we go back and review. What is Islam based upon? What are we here to do? Why are we here? What's the point of all of this? What is the objective? What should we be achieving? Because if you don't understand, for example, the knowledge of what it's based upon, at least you can look at the outcomes. And if the outcomes aren't correct, then you can conclude from that then that the principles or the values that it's based are wrong, or you can go back and you can ask the right questions. This is how everything works. If you have a company, you do this, ya Sheikh. If you have a company, you have to do this. You have to go back, okay, what is our vision? What is our mission? What are our values? What are our principles? Are we achieving the quarterly goals? Are we not? Why aren't we? For Islam, it's no different. As an ummah, we have to do this. As a community, we have to do this. And as an individual, you have to do this as well. We all do. Ask ourselves, what is Islam for? What am I supposed to be doing here? What are the outcomes that I should see? And that saves you from getting lost within the details of it all. It saves you because the details can become complex and confusing sometimes. And it's left for those who are specialized to talk about them. So if you've been listening to me for the last couple of weeks, and for the sake of the argument, you are entertaining these topics, and you're like, all right, fine. Islam is 3 domains, 3 dimensions, 3 buckets, 3 pillars. I have to invest in all 3 of them simultaneously, equally. I need to invest in the rituals and the practices and the behaviors, which is what we call Islam. I have to invest in the theology, the attitudes, the perspectives, the understandings, the comprehensions, which we call Iman. I have to invest into the quality assurance, in the intentions, the reasoning for behind why I do what I do, which we call Ihsan. And in order for these 3 to work, mortality and accountability have to continue to exist. It has to be right there. I have to put it on my billboard, on my pinboard. Just pin it on my board. Keep it there at all times. Reminding me the formula is not secure without it. The formula does not function without it. I understand that I'm on a journey, and that this journey has a premise to it. That Allah Subhanahu wa Taala put me here for a reason. There's a purpose. There's a transaction between me and Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, where I have to serve others, where I have to give in order to receive later. or I have to actually be selfless now in order for him to show me that which I desire, which is my selfishness, to be fulfilled on the day of judgment. Once you understand all of this, and it's clear to you, you will reap some of the benefits on an individual level. You will find fulfillment, inshallah, and you will find synchrony, and you will find direction, and you will find integrity of your ethics and your thought process and your knowledge and your relationships. But then the question becomes, well, what does the collective get out of all of this? What does the group get out of all of this? Because at the end, as a race of human beings, this has always been our focus. It's been our interest. Because we can't exist alone. We can't live alone. We live amongst groups. The populations come together. There are nations and tribes and cities and countries. We have to exist as groups. So if whatever way we're living is not allowing the group to prosper, then this is not a functional method. It's not. So whatever we talk about here has to serve the collective. If it's not serving it, if it's not allowing it to succeed, if Islam works on the individual level, like it helps you personally and me personally, but together it doesn't work, then I'm telling you it's not of interest. Then you have to throw it out. It's not of interest. But if anything, this is what Islam did. If you can't see anything else within Islamic history, or nothing else is clear to you regarding of how Islam exists, then this has to be. This absolutely has to be. This is the clearest one of all. It's the easiest of the arguments to make. Because of the example, because we have an example. Because he gave us an example, alayhi salatu wasalam. He gave us an example. So let me share this with you. When it comes to arguing issues of Islam, it's easy. As long as I stay in the theory, as long as I'm talking to someone and we stay in the hypotheses, we stay talking about the principles and the theory, I can mop the floor with this back and forth, no problem. I'll have my way. It's easy. It's nothing because they have nothing. They don't have, but the moment it becomes practical, I have to hide myself. I have to stand behind a pillar somewhere. The moment they ask me, why is this beautiful way of life not working for you? Why aren't your communities prospering on this? Why isn't your ummah, why isn't your nation, why aren't the Muslims like that? If it's so great, if it's so amazing, if it's that clear and that powerful, why aren't you guys doing better? I have no comeback that is reasonable. Obviously, I have something to say, but it's not. I don't even believe it. My comeback is not powerful. I have to start. I squirm. He caught me. Just no. I don't want to talk about the practical. Let's talk about the theory. No, the theory is great, but does it work? Does it work? I have evidence that it worked once. Yes, I have strong evidence, but why isn't it working now? I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. I don't know why we don't have integrity of thoughts and relationships and ethics. I don't know why Muslims aren't fulfilled. I don't know why we haven't achieved the goals for the collective as Muslims. I don't know. But it's very hard to make the argument of why people need to accept Islam and why Islam is the solution for everything when we can't make this, or when we can't talk about this appropriately, when we can't prove. We can't demonstrate that this actually works. You see, he demonstrated that, alayhi salatu wasalam. He did. Had he not, I would fade away right now. Had he not, I would fade away because my people weren't Muslim when he was alive, alayhi salatu wasalam. They accepted Islam decades after he passed. Had he lived, this is very important to understand. Had the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam lived long enough to see the Islamic empire become what it became, then the way to understand Islam would be it's a one-man show. It was just the magnificence of this one man, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and that would be the argument. But the hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was that he was going to pass away and Islam was just in Arabia, barely in Arabia, not in all of it actually. Most of those who were a part of the Muslim ummah at the time were just based on treaties that were signed of alliances, but not actual governance and ruling. If you ever you can do this online. You can go and you can ask, and you can look at a map of the old world. So I'm talking about Northern Africa, Europe, and what we call today the Middle East. And you can run a timeline, and the timeline can move starting from prehistoric times, like way before, in a couple of thousand years BC, and it'll move at the speed of 100 years a second, right? And you get to see all the empires and their movements on the map, like who is conquering what, who is ruling what, and each empire is granted a color. The Romans are usually given red, and the Persians are usually given black and other colors, and you just see these colors move back and forth, the struggles of all the empires of the land. And it's very interesting to watch. I find it fascinating because you see the movement of people. And then somewhere around the 7th century, green explodes. It literally explodes. You feel like someone took a bucket of paint and threw it on the map Because with less than 30 years, it went from a dot. It starts as a dot somewhere in Arabia where you don't even notice the dot, and then suddenly all across 3 continents. How did that? We have no example of that elsewhere. Like, you don't have another historical example that is similar to this. Only this story only exists for the Ummah of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And he wasn't there for that explosion. He wasn't there for it. It happened. He died he passed away in the 11th year of Hijrah. It was the 45th year. So we're talking 30 years later. 30 years, it's not a long time. 30 years later. Islam was the biggest empire that the world had ever seen. How did that happen? You see, if it was just about him, alayhi salatu wasalam, Islam would have started to shrink after he passed away. But it didn't. It did the absolute opposite. It did the complete opposite. And the number of people who accepted Islam after he passed away, alayhi salatu wasalam, is not even comparable to the number of people who accepted it when he was alive. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Because it worked for the collective. Because what he taught actually functioned for the group. It worked for them. It's still mind-boggling till this day. How he took these group of people. If you understand Arabic culture, you understand how people were, the rigidity of it, the rigidity of their culture, how difficult they were as people, how rough they were as individuals, how he was able to take this group of people, illiterate, never governed before, have no sense of law, have no sense of others, are living in a climate that's extremely unmerciful. It's unforgiving. To take people like that, and then within maybe a decade or two, have them standing in prayer like all night in tears. Have someone like that standing there sobbing, reading the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just absolutely sobbing. How did he do this? I don't know. I have no idea. I have no comprehension of how he was able to transform people this way and to actually give an example of a community that worked. It wasn't perfect. There was always going to be mistakes, but people came. You don't know this maybe. People came around from Arabia to look and witness mu'akha. They came to witness mu'akha. They weren't interested in religion. They just heard that a man from Quraysh was living in the house from a man of Aus and Khazraj. An Adnanite was living in the house of a Qahtanite. That's blasphemy. This is insane. Who's saying this? Who is ignorant enough to say something like that? No, it's happening. I don't believe it. Go see it. So they went to see it. Is it true? Abdul Rahman bin Auf is living in Sa'd ibn Rabi'ah's house? Ajib. How is this happening? Based on what? How did he do this? It was the interest in what he was able to do for the collective, alayhi salatu wasalam. The reason, if you go to any country in the Middle East, any city in my country, go to Damascus or Aleppo or Homs or Hama, you think all of them are Muslim? No. There are, I'm talking about historic neighborhoods where people there have been living for thousands of years and they belong to a different faith. That faith only exists in that city. They're a minority of 700, 800 people. I kid you not. You can go and witness this. They've been there for a long time. I'm not talking just about people who are Jewish or Christian. No. People from different faiths altogether. They were never forced. No one was forced to accept Islam. Why did people accept? The reason that they say it's forced because they can't explain it any other way. They can't explain how is it that so many people accepted this faith in such short time. It makes no sense. It does when you are witnessing something that you've always wanted. The spirit yearns for this. It yearns for a community that's built on compassion, built on empathy, built on selflessness, on giving, on service. A community that's built on equality and justice and fairness. People want this, they're thirsty for it. So when the Sahaba brought it to them, people accepted. They accepted not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And that's why I'm Muslim here today. And that's why most of you are too. Most of you here are Muslim because of this same phenomenon. Because it worked. It worked for a while. Now, why it didn't work after that, what happened, that's a different discussion. It's a whole different, it's complicated afterwards. But in order for us to be able to make an argument for our deen, this has to come back again. This has to be brought back. The functionality of Islam amongst the group, amongst the collective, has to be brought back. This is where Islam shines. This is where it works the most and the best. You see, when you study the utopias of different philosophers, you get bored really quickly, by the way. You should do it because you'll be disappointed. Like it's not as deep as maybe you're led to think. It really isn't. But what was the utopia that Ibrahim had in mind, or the Prophet ﷺ had in mind? Ever asked the question, what was the Prophet ﷺ's dream for us? What did he envision for us happening? Here's Islam, here's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ruling, here's his teaching. Follow. What did he envision to happen later? What was going to happen? How were things going to change? Did he have that vision, alayhi salatu wasalam? Of course he did. Does the Quran talk about that? For sure. The Quran repeats to us time and time again Ibrahim alayhi salam's vision of it. When Ibrahim alayhi salam says, Rabbi, قال إبراهيم ربي اجعل هذا بلدا آمنا وارزق أهله من الثمرات. Safety and security. May there be prosperity. People have enough to. ربي جنبني وبني أن نعبد الأصنام. May Tawheed spread amongst people. ربي إنهن أضللن كثيرا من الناس فمن تبعني فإنه مني ومن عصاني فإنك غفور رحيم. A place where Tawheed, where that concept of monotheism would be existent, the understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be clear. And those who go astray, asani, will find forgiveness. Will find a loving hand to bring them back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they won't find destruction or death. They'll find someone who will bring them back to Allah again. This is the utopia of Ibrahim and Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam ajma'een. The Prophet was talking about this to Adi in the known hadith of Adi ibn Hatim al-Ta'i and other hadith where he talks about the time will come. You think we're weak now, Adi, yeah? You don't want to accept Islam? The time will come where لا يفيضن المال حتى يخرج الرجل بزكاة ماله فلا يجد من يقبله. A man will come and take out his wealth to give for the sake of Allah, and no one will take it because everyone is doing well. Because it's a compassionate society. It functions properly. So people aren't starving. He would talk alayhi salatu where a time will come where a lady will get on her camel and she will leave from Iraq and go to Mecca to make Hajj and alone, fearing no one but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This was his vision alayhi salatu wasalam. He knew this would happen if we followed the rules, if we followed the teachings appropriately. If you don't get the outcome, one of two things. Either the principles that you based your whole story on were wrong, or you're not doing it right. Right? There's no second, no third option. It's either this or that. When we don't get the outcomes, when personally we're not finding the outcomes that Islam should bring us, and communally, collectively as an ummah, we don't find those outcomes that we're looking for, then we have to go back and ask ourselves, how are we doing this right? How are we following this? Do we need a revision of how we are adhering to the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه يغفر لكم يا فوز المستغفرين استغفر الله. الحمد لله وحده وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على من لا نبي بعده وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اتبع نهجه ووفى عهده. He says عليه الصلاة والسلام, the correct collection of Imam Ahmad with an authentic chain of narration, narrated to us by Ubay bin Ka'ab, he says, قال عليه الصلاة والسلام بشر هذه الأمة بالسناء والرفعة والنصر والتمكين في الأرض فمن عمل منهم عملا من الآخرة للدنيا لم يكن له في الآخرة من نصيب. He says عليه الصلاة والسلام, tell this ummah as I pass away that they will find sana, they will find ease, they will find prosperity, they will find nasr, they will find victory, they will find rifa, they will find status, they will find tamkeen, they will find strength, they will find strength on this earth. So any of them who does an action of akhirah with the intention of gaining something in dunya, may they know that they will find nothing on the day of judgment. Why? Because why would you do it for dunya? Dunya is going to be taken care of. Follow the rules appropriately. Follow the rules correctly. Learn Islam appropriately, and it will guide you down a path that will bring you all of these things. It will bring the community, it will bring the nation prosperity and unity and strength and status and knowledge and superiority of ethics and principle. It'll bring all of that. So don't do anything for dunya. Do it for akhirah, because dunya will be taken care of. Just make sure you're doing it for akhirah. If you do it for dunya, that means you didn't understand things appropriately. You'll find nothing yawm al-qiyamah. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ajma'in. That's what he told us. 3 things are granted for this ummah if we follow appropriately. If we do this right, then we're going to get 3 things. Number 1, you're going to get reform. You're going to go get societies that find reform within them. This is what you find the Quran talks about. Shu'aib says, "In uridu illa al-islaha mastata'at." I just want to bring reform to the best of my ability. I want to fix social reform and financial reform and ethical reform. This is what you'll get. Societies that have the ability to see that which is wrong amongst them and fix it in that which is good and help it. Ma'ruf is properly defined, it's better defined. And munkar is more clearly defined. And we encourage ma'ruf and we discourage munkar. You see, Islam has something called the darurat al-khams or al-kulliyat al-khams, depending on what books of usul al-fiqh you study. The Hanafis have a different terminology for it, but it's the same idea. We have 5 darurat. These are the goals of Islam. Islam exists amongst people to preserve 5 things. It's here to preserve a deen, which is your freedom of belief. It's here to preserve your freedom of belief, your ability to believe and to think freely and to make your choices. Hifz al-nafs is here to preserve your life so that no one takes it away from. Hifz al-mal, to preserve your wealth. Hifz al-aql, to preserve your intellect, your sobriety, your ability to think, because that's what makes us different from animals. And hifz al-ird, to preserve your integrity so that you're respected, so that you walk around and you can hold your head high. This is what Islam is here for. Islam exists to preserve these things. And that's how you have a reformed society. Number 2, general guidance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defines victory as such. إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ. When the victory of Allah and the opening of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He opens the gates of His blessing and His rahmah upon us, what happens? The swords of the Muslims, what happens? وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. And you see people enter into the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in groups, in large numbers, all at once. Because we achieve guidance for ourselves and we help others achieve guidance as well. What's the point? That's the goal. We want people to stay kuffar. We want the people. Do we want to continue to be a minority? Of course not. We want this guidance to go beyond us. We want people to take it and excel in it and go farther than us, and then we benefit from what the good deeds that we do and the good deeds that they do. And then the third thing is that you have a general spread of peace and justice on the planet. We achieve the silm. We achieve al-adl. You achieve a certain degree of equality, of equity, of fairness, of justice, of peace. That's the point of Islam. This is what Islam brings. This is what Islam, it doesn't just bring it for us, it brings it to everybody. This khair is not just going to happen to us, it happens to everyone around us. And this is why this system is put in place. It works. It works. It already did. I don't need to prove that to you. It already did work. And if you don't know that it works, go back and study. Go back and read. It worked once before. The transformation happened. And the change occurred in a way that has not been paralleled historically before it or after it. So we already know it works. So the problem is not the actual content. It's not the substance itself. It's not the theory. The problem is in the practice. The problem is in people actually doing this. That's the issue. I'm willing to listen to the argument of the theory being wrong, but you will lose that argument with me. It's easy to win that argument, but how do we turn this theory into practice? I don't know. That's hard. That seems to be way more difficult than I thought it was when I was younger. That's why you look back and you wish you stayed young, where you could have that idealistic look. It's easier to live that way. But as the older I get, the less, how is this going to work? How are we going to make this happen? How are we going to take this beautiful theory, these teachings that are absolutely magnificent, and allow them to do what they were designed to do in the heart of the individual and and affect the collective in a way that is meaningful and for us to see the benefits? And this is what we need to do again. We go back to the basics of our deen. We go back and understand it at its roots, at its fundamentals, and we start building up from there. As individuals and as communities, we have to prove something to ourselves here. It's really proving something to Allah. Really, that's what it is. It's proving something to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You want to be with Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the people with him, then you have to prove that you can take that which he left and do with it something similar to what he did with it, alayhi salatu wasalam, the people with him. And if we fail and we can't, then I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know. And it makes me scared. And when we exist in a country like this, where the freedoms are available to you, like you don't have to, I don't think either you've been away for too long or you didn't grow up in a place where you didn't have freedoms. I don't know which one it is. Either you didn't grow up in a place where you did not have the freedom to be Muslim and to pray Fajr in the masjid without someone looking over your shoulder to see who you are and write your name down somewhere, where you could not go and attend the dars, for example, in the masjid in a late hour, where you couldn't go and learn Quran, where you could not go and start some form of charity that would help other people without being scrutinized to the point where you hate the fact that you even made that decision, where you try to take it back and they won't let you take it back. You're like, I don't want to do this anymore. Khalas, I don't want to. No, I'm sorry. Now you're going to go through the system whether you like it or not. Either you didn't live that way, or you lived that way and you allowed yourself to forget it. Either way, you're at fault for not understanding the opportunity that you have here. I am serious when I say this. I know that we are surrounded by garbage. I know that the values that surround us are not great. Ma'ruf now is munkar, and munkar is ma'ruf in many aspects of our existence. I know that. We all know that. But that does not take away the fact that we have the opportunity. We have the opportunity to prove that Islam works on the individual level and on the communal level. And as long as we continue to fail, then I don't know what we're going to tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I prefer to go live in a place where there's no freedom, because at least that way there's nothing. No, you can't hold me to anything. I had no choice. That's why we. But here, I don't know how to make the argument. I don't know what we're going to say. Why was it that you couldn't make things work? Why was it that you behaved that way as a group? That you lacked the empathy, that you lacked the brotherhood, that you lacked unity, that your youth weren't taken care of, that your vulnerable were not looked after. Why? Explain why. What was it that was missing? What was it? Were they forcing? Were they being coerced? Did you not have the knowledge? What didn't you have? Yeah. Ask yourself that question. What didn't you have? What was it that was missing? What are we blaming now? Who are we blaming now? Who is it? Yeah. Inshallah, next week and this weekend and the weekend after, the halaqat before Isha and after Isha will be for Ramadan preparation. So please feel free to come and attend and kind of get yourself in the mood and in the get yourself in the mindset for this beautiful month that is coming our way. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the ability to reach Ramadan and perform within it all the acts of worship that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala desires from us and puts us in a better place both mentally and personally. I hope that was a benefit to you. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ أَمَرَنَا بِأَمْرٍ عَظِيمٍ فَقَالَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَمَلَائِكَتَهُ يُصَلُّونَ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا صَلُّوا عَلَيْهِ وَسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد وارض اللهم عن الأربعة الخلفاء السادة الحنفاء أبي بكر وعمر وعثمان وعلي وارض اللهم عن أزواجه أمهات المؤمنين وعن آله الطيبين الطاهرين وعن صحابته الغر الميامين وعن التابعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وعنا معهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات اللهم فرج هموم المهمومين ونفس كروب المكروبين وارفع الغم عن المغمومين وارفع الظلم عن المظلومين واحقن دماءنا ودماء المسلمين اللهم رد المسجد الأقصى إلى رحاب المسلمين اللهم أخرج الصهاينة منه أذلة صاغرين اللهم فرج عن إخواننا المستضعفين في كل مكان فرج عنهم في فلسطين فرج عنهم في السودان فرج عنهم في جميع بقاع الأرض يا رب العالمين وردنا إليك وإلى دينك ردا جميلا وتب علينا من جميع ذنوبنا توبة نصوحا اللهم بلغنا أجمعين رمضان اللهم ارزقنا في رمضان الصيام والقيام وغض البصر وحفظ اللسان اللهم اجعلنا في رمضان من عتقائك من النار يا رب العالمين وما ذلك عليك اللهم بعزيز ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون أقم الصلاة